Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity Radiant Light. It is Sunday, May 15th. I'm Reverend Cherie Ruffo, and I'm continuing the Nag Hammadi series today with the Gnostic Gospels, Melchizedek and Sethism. We began this journey for our Lenten series, and over the past several weeks, we have looked at a lot of the different Gnostic Gospels to really get, we're looking for the themes within each one. And when I began this one, I noticed something different. First, let me say that the Nag Hammadi Library was found in Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1946. And a year prior to that, in the Qumran caves above Jerusalem, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And these are believed to be the Gospels that were not included in the Bible as we know it. They were left out and no one's sure of all the reasons, whether it was so people would not understand how powerful they are and divine, or whether it was just some of the information may have been too difficult. Or as we're going to explore today, there's other theories of how we began. And we've seen different, Valentinianism was one of the categories of the scriptures. People came from that era. They lived in that part of the world. Where today we're looking at the Sethian grouping. And we've already talked about the secret book of John, which is one of them. But as I got into this, I realized the themes are really different. There's a different story of how we began. The Sethian was believed. The Sethian scriptures and teachings were followed in the 2nd and 3rd century. They were written then, and it's believed that Seth did not write them, but Seth was the 3rd son of Adam and Eve, and it was based on Judaism. But you could see other with this. You could see other Zoroastrianism and other beliefs that were in Iran, were in all the different areas that were in the Middle East at the time. You could find pieces of that, which tells us a lot, because we know that truth is truth, and you're going to see these themes happening over and over again as we talk about love or any of the things that we talk about or study today. That's why Unity believes that all paths lead to God. But one of the things that the Sethian I first noticed when I looked at this was that it really deals a lot, focuses on the origins of the world. And they identified Seth, the 3rd son of Adam and Eve, with Christ. The Christ divinity. We know that Christ was not Jesus' last name. It's a divinity that's within us. We can become the best that we can be, the best version, the most spiritual, the perfect child of God. So one of the things we looked at is, when I was looking at this, I noticed that this isn't really the story, the creation story as we know it, that it's Adam and Eve. This is really a prologue to what happened before Adam and Eve. And I have to say, it kind of blew my mind. So, but then if we look at the creation story, and we'll see things that in there that really are unbelievable or mind-blowing too. So as we travel through the story, just keep an open mind, and then we're going to look at how it relates to us today. And then at the end of this, we're going to look at Melchizedek, who was he was not during this time. He was probably 1,000 years or more before, actually more, about 3,000 years before Jesus' time, and how his priesthood related to all this too, and comes into the story. And also we're going to look around and see where the story is today. And I found it in a couple fairy tales. And that's not too surprising either. So we know that the Sethian Gospels describe the prologue to Genesis, the Garden of Eden. And I think the reason that this wasn't included in the Bible, original Bible, is because it's such a radical reinterpretation of the Jewish creation story. And as we go into this, as we go into this, we're going to be talking about this reinterpretation. So here's the story. This is how it goes. The original Barbello, there was believed to have been more than one god, and Barbello was believed to have been the purest form of that. Barbello was actually also not a male, was equated with the female. Sorry about that. I was looking, I had a picture of Barbello. Was the female divine feminine. So you see, as I started to get into this, I started seeing another story. And what happens with Barbello is the perfection, the divine feminine of all the things that we've learned, and a softening. And then Sophia came along. We know Sophia as wisdom, but Sophia was one of these eons or gods, rulers. They call them the archons, rulers from that time, came along, and she allowed a piece of her to be stolen. And when that happened, our world was created. It was created by the darker archons, which is the leaders. Some people say it's Yahweh. This is where it really got into trouble with the Bible. And our divinity at that point was hidden from us. So Sophia had gotten in a lot of trouble because she allowed this to happen. And at that point, when you look through the story, the perfection that we had in the Garden of Eden fell because we lost this divinity. We no longer believed or knew that we were from a divine race. We believed that we were separate, that we're separate from God, that we're separate from each other. And this took us into a long, thousands and thousands of years of the Dark Ages. We saw the rise of greed and power and wars and illnesses and all the things that, according to this, was never supposed to happen in our world. So Barbello sent one of her in the, well, really, even though it's divine feminine, still not a sex, sent an emissary in the form of Jesus the Christ to bring us back to this truth, to come to our world and teach us these truths. And Barbello, when I look at Barbello in the Bible, I did find some references to Barbello. This is one, John 7, chapter 17, verse 3. This is eternal life, to know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you sent. So when they started comparing the Nag Hammadi scriptures, and really we're looking at the Sethian scriptures at this point, where they go into, Seth goes into this it's a triactate. I'm going to try to play part of it for you. If I can't, I can send this to you guys later on. If you can't, I tried to play it earlier, and I had some trouble with it because I'm going to go to a specific place. If I do, I'll send it out to you in a bit.
And you were first to come to stand. You have been divided everywhere, and you have remained one. Whomever you wished you have saved, and you wish that all who are worthy be saved. You are perfect. You are perfect. You are perfect. The first stele of Seth. The second stele of Seth. Communal hymn to the Barbello Aeon, unified author of multiplicity. Great is the first Aeon, male virgin Barbello, the first glory of the invisible Father. You who are called perfect first saw that the one who really pre-exists is non-being. From and through that one you have eternally proceeded, the non-being one from an undivided, triple-powered one. You are a triple power. You are a great oneness from a pure oneness. You are a superior oneness, first shadow of the Holy Father, light from light. We praise you, producer of perfection, supplier of aeons. You saw that those who are eternal derive from a shadow. You have given rise to multiplicity, yet you turned out to remain one, whilst.
So this is 16 minutes long, and like I said, I can send you the link if you would like it. These are the steels of Seth, and in these steels, and this is Seth's praise and prayers to Barbello, who came from the eternal one, the one that's never born, never dies, that we come from. Throughout these steels, he talks about Barbello, who is pure, purity in form, um, who Jesus is from, who we're from. And he said something happened, and when we were born on this earth, and it was, in the Garden of Eden or prior to, and it's believed that Sophia lost a piece of herself that was hidden within us. But he talks about us and says that he says Barbello is from a different race, and that we're from a different race, and that he knows that everything's going to be okay, that we're going to find this divinity within us again. And this is what Sethism was based on, which is kind of similar to the Essenes when you think about it, because they were about finding the purity too, the purity of who we really are. And when you go into Hinduism and you go into all the different faiths on the planet, they all pretty much say the same thing, that we are from love. We are love. There's unification between all of us. We're not separate from God, and that we have divinity hidden within us. So this is one of the things that really comes through more clearly in these Gnostic scriptures than any other ones that I looked at, the Sethism. And I find it remarkable because somehow, as all the years have come down, many of the religions have evolved to teach us that we're separate, and that God is separate, and that God is created in our image and likeness, and is he might have rage, judgments, all the things that are attributes of human. We lost the truth that we are made in the image and likeness of God. It's there, it's in front of us, but somehow it was twisted. So when these belief systems were going on in the 2nd and 3rd century, as the Rome was getting stronger and stronger, and the truths were happening, especially with these scenes, with Sethism, with all of the different groups that were there, Zoroastrianism. The best thing for the church to do was to exterminate them, to commit genocide. This way, it would take all of these different beliefs off the planet, and we would only focus on one. But as we look in India and all the other schools of thought, those continued on. Might have gotten lost in some stories, some truths, but they stayed on that path. But it did continue on too, because as this group, the Sethiism, just like the Essenes, realized what was happening, and they had written these scriptures, as the few that were left hid them. They were hidden in Nag Hammadi, they were hidden in Qumran, and they were also hidden in plain sight too, in front of us. And I saw this, I took a look, and I started thinking about some of the stories that we know, things that are in front of us. Brought me to Little Mermaid. Think about the amulet, the shell that the sea witch used to take Ariel's immortality away from her, and take her beauty and her truth, the divine purity, out of her. And she stole it so that she could use it to stay immortal. She used it for dark purposes. As we saw in the arc of the story, the prince comes along and saves Ariel, and she gets it back, and she lives happily ever after. That story from Sethism and from that belief system is very apparent in this story. And as I went through other ones, I found the same thing. We have the curse of King Arthur when Amber steals the amulet. And what does that amulet hold? Immortality, unification, all the secrets that are talked about in these gospels. So the story about immortality being stolen from us or hidden from us, the story, and then becomes the story of how Jesus comes to help us get this back. And this is where Melchizedek really comes into it. We first see him in the Bible. Melchizedek comes up with Abraham when Abraham is promised that he's going to be father to Judaism. Basically, they were going to have a huge family. He heads off into the desert, into the lands of Canaan, and he comes to this village or town, city called Shalom, which in Hebrew, if you look at that, that's Jerusalem. So God promises Abraham that he's the father of the Israelites, that he would have a wonderful life in Canaan. And Abraham and his wife Sarah traveled to Shalom, and the king there, who is also the high priest Melchizedek, comes out to greet them. And he tells Abraham that he worships the same God that that Melchizedek does. Abraham does, which is really unusual for the time because the belief systems were so different then. And then Melchizedek serves him and his entire army and group and family a feast. In the end, Abraham is so taken by Melchizedek that he gives him 1/10 of all that he has. He tithes to him. And what's so remarkable about it is you would never find that happening during that time in Canaan. You wouldn't find someone from Abraham's background doing something like that. So Melchizedek appears there. He's known to be the holy righteous one. He a wonderful priest, and his belief system is very similar to what we say it's coming from the cosmology of Sethism, and this is way before we see it in the Gnostic scriptures. So they believe, if you go back into and study Melchizedek, which it existed, it came on. There's actually mystery schools with Melchizedek. There's the information has come down through secret times. That Melchizedek performed many, many great things. So we see his Melchizedek. I went into there's a gospel about Melchizedek, and he talks about he's known in the gospels as the one who really foretells in detail the coming of Jesus the Christ. He identifies it, and he said he's given a vision to understand that he will play a crucial role in the incarnation of the priest Jesus the Christ. And this analogy was found in the parables. The same kind of story was found in the book of Enoch, which was not part of Nag Hammadi, but was found later, but had a lot of the same principles in it as what Melchizedek was talking about. So he sees this Son of Man coming. He knows that he's going to come here and teach the truth about us. He's from Barbello, the good, and he teaches of the Holy Father, the one. And in the incarnations of Melchizedek, he gives a lot, really good description about this. Now, the Gospel of Judas, which is also Sethism, talks about similar beginnings as this, and how Judas was the only disciple who really understood who Jesus was, that he was from Barbello, that he was from this great and his truth, and he was coming here to help us find our divinity again. And that in the thing that was so probably why the Gospel of Judas got pulled, not only for the fact that in our history, in our Bibles, talks about Judas selling Jesus out, and so he could make, for money. In the Gospel of Judas, it describes that Judas understood who Jesus was, and Jesus asked him to do that. He said, this has to happen in this way. And Judas didn't want to do it, but he did, and he knew he had to do this so that we would be where we are today, which is probably the reason I'm guessing the Gospel of Judas was pulled too. But what we find, if we go into the mystery schools, they talk about Melchizedek, especially when you get to the ones that are around today. The two that I studied under also talked about Melchizedek. One of them, two of them actually, talked about Jesus being here 3 times. And the first time he came as Melchizedek. He was the great priest, the holy righteous one. The second time he came as Poseidon in Atlantis. And then it was determined that he came too soon. That he came too soon. The fall of those societies, the eons had already started. And when he came as Jesus the Christ, he came earlier, so that these teachings could be taught and would be remembered and would lead to the Great Awakening. So we see even in the mystery schools, we see that there's relationships between all of these and this story, this history of Barbelo. So Melchizedek was not only the priest of the God Most High, he was also, he was called the Righteous One. He was named that by the people. They believe that the book of Melchizedek was written in the 2nd or 3rd centuries was Coptic with a Sethian slant. So we see that there's a direct relationship to all these stories. National Geographic, the Judas Gospel didn't come to light and wasn't translated very early, and it was hidden until National Geographic picked it up in 2007. I think it was 2007, and told the story from that perspective. It was decoding the secrets of the 1700-year-old text. So what does this lead to? First of all, I was really confused this week. I don't know about you guys, but there was so much information, and my biggest problem is, how am I going to explain this? So the only way I could do it was to come back and really put the different gospels together and start looking for the similarities between them. This tells an incredible story. It talks about Barbelo. It talks about the one God, that we believe in, the one, and as we talk about in unity, the one power. And it was good. And that the belief system was very similar. We know that unity comes down, was developed from a lot of these belief systems, and the Cathars came later after the Gnostics, and the unity beliefs came directly from that. So we also see in our own faith system, school of thoughts, these same themes. So I wanted to look at this and kind of drill it down and say, what are the main themes here? Because this is a lot of information, and I was really doing some head scratching here. And what I saw is from the Nag Hammadi, Dead Sea Scrolls, all the other ancient schools, they're all built on the same premise. These other ancient religions, we know Melchizedek was even, I did some research, found him in the Quran, found him in other belief systems. There's a story here, and this story has lived for a long time. They all talk to us about needing to awaken this hidden divinity which is inside of us, that we are not separate. If you want to, I can send you the links to the steels of Seth, 3 steels of Seth. It talks over and over and over again. It says the word unity, and how we are not separate from each other. We come from the divine, which is good. And all people do. There's nobody left out. But also, I saw the theme running across all of these stories when I got into the story of Sophia, on how we lost the divine feminine. Because we know that when Sophia, we know Barbelo was, it's always pictured in the feminine form. So what happened with that? What happened with the divine feminine? It was covered up, saw the rise of masculinity. And a lot of people say, well, toxic masculinity. Well, things happen. If you go too far in one direction, it's going to be out of balance. So one of the things Jesus came to teach us is to bring that balance back, bring the divine feminine back into balance with the masculine, and to understand that we are all one. We're not separate. There's nobody that's created better than the other. Well, our systems on this planet haven't run that way in the past, and we still see it today, where we have cultures that are way out of balance when it comes to masculine, feminine, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to power. We see power grabs all the time. All you have to do is turn on the news, maybe follow what's happening in some of our politics, right? I'm not going there. This isn't about politics, but this is about what happened when we had too much of the masculinity in this world and we didn't have enough of the femininity. But we have to come back into this balance. And this is what Jesus came to teach us. And he knew that if we understood this divine feminine that's within us and the divine masculine, and we brought it into balance, that we'd see the end of hatred. We'd see the end of war. We'd see the end of disease as we know it, because as he did that, as he was very balanced, look at all the healing that he did. And that we all have these abilities within us. As he said, you too can do this and more. The other theme that I saw coming across in this is they talk about that we're not from this earth, but from a divine source. That our essence was planted here, but this isn't our natural habitat, that we are not in these human bodies permanently, because in every theme, and this is when you can look also at the indigenous beliefs, we just go to our American Indians and look at what they and their belief system in the rainbow body. You look across that we're at a time, and you look, and I looked across at all of Hindu, all of the teachings across the world, and they talk about the rainbow bodies, they talk about the light bodies, and our own ascension teachings. We know that this is the time that most believe that we're stepping into now, is where we're releasing our carbon-based body and going back into our crystalline body, our light body, because we're letting go of the old beliefs that are very limiting, and understanding that we're so much more, that we are all divine beings. And the thing that I think that really as these teachings came out, when they were squashed, I think the main premise that they were squashed from is because these teachings tell us that divinity is not a special club. It's our natural state. You don't have to buy it. Nobody's going to put it on for you. This is a journey that we take ourselves. Jesus came to teach us this. He sat with all people, whether they had money or they didn't, whether they were sick, whether they were tax collectors, whatever it was. He came and taught equality. And we know that he was balanced in the masculine and feminine, especially when you look into our traditional Bible and the letters that were written about Jesus into the groups that were started based on the Christ teachings were written to the leaders of the church at the time. They're all women, every single one of them. So Jesus came to teach us that there was balance in the world. He came, his premise, and he knew that we were going to reach a state where we'd awaken to the divinity within us, and that we would, at that point, create the new earth. And I believe that that time is now. And we know that the Mayans identified 2012 as that time. If you notice, things started happening in 2012. All of the mystery schools unlocked their archives, because when they were hunted down, they became secret teachings. And people that were in these parts of these groups, the initiates, were never allowed to talk about what's within them. But if you look now, the vaults are open, because the time is now for us to awaken, to remember who we are. So as difficult and I mean, just like I said, mind-blowing in some parts as these teachings were, they all came down to the same theme, that we are divine beings. This divinity is within us. And as I came through this week, and let me tell you, I struggled a lot. My husband can tell you about it too. He's watching it. With this, I had something happen the other evening, and I had a dream. And these dreams, a lot of times these are lucid dreams for me. I woke up with two things. One is I had lost a piece of equipment for our living room, and was not able to find it anywhere. I've been looking. I woke up with the thought of where it was, and it was someplace I never would have looked, and it was exactly there. It was stuffed inside, all the way down under my couch, but on the inside, so I never could have seen it if I looked under it. Not sure how it got there. And I also woke up with this thought, this very clear instruction that it's time to have one more week of the Gnostic Gospels, and that the time is really important for us now because of what's happening this evening with this eclipse that we're going through, that there's a new energy on the planet, and that starting in June for 12 weeks, for the 12 weeks that I'll be on, we have to awaken the 12 layers of the DNA. Each week we're going to do an activation and open that up. We're going to tie it back to the archangels, but we're also going to tie it, these are the 12 layers, and we're studying this in our esoterics class. We're going to tie it back to the archangels and also tie it back to the 12 chakras. Most people know of the 7 chakras, but because of this information with the divinity that's come in, we know that there's 12 layers of the chakra. Each week, we will delve into each of the chakras, but as they pertain to the layer of the DNA. We know that the first chakra, well, the base chakra for us, is the biological layer of the tree of life. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at our divine blueprints. But we're going to go into depth, and at the end of it, each week in meditation, we're going to activate it. We've done activations before with these 12, with the 12 chakras, but this is a different time. And as we open ourselves up to it, we're going to be awakening these mysteries of who we are, awakening and remembering who we are and what we're here for. And helping, as we do that, we know that as one, we're helping the planet with the awakening that's happening. And as we know, as we say, well, how can this be a time of awakening? Because there's so many bad things happening. We know that the hidden things that are hidden in this earth that are not worthy of the divine, as we see it with power, we see it with really dark energy, it has to come to the surface so we can heal it. So as we go through this awakening of these chakras, together, we're going to be assisting the earth in this awakening. And the only instruction that I woke up with was that it needs to be done before September. So whatever that means, we'll be finding out. I don't always know. I just, I wake up, sometimes I wake up with ideas. I did with my company and done well with it. I know that these are the things to follow. So I hope you'll join me on this journey, a continued journey of our awakening, of remembering who we are, of just breathing into this information, accepting. And one of the things that I found is the more truths I find, and sometimes as unbelievable as they seem, when I look back to what I was raised with, what was called truth, is really just as unbelievable. So this is making more sense. It's clear, it's simple. It's time to just be who and what we are. Let that light shine, and let it shine brightly on this planet, because you are divine. You have within you, in your DNA, that divinity that comes from the one power and the one presence in the universe. And within that is the power to create the life that you want, the life that we want on this planet. Because one of the things we do know that has been measured in science, with an awakened individual, that power that comes from that person, and it was studied at Princeton, it's been studied at Yale, as they've measured the ores and the energy in people, can influence 1 million people. So it's important for each one of us to be here and part of this. And the best part is I get to take the journey with you. I love that. So as we move this morning from the talk into meditation, I'm going to do it with the awakening, because tonight we have this lunar eclipse, the blood moon that they call it, that is so powerful that it's leading us into a new place with energy. I'd like to open our meditation. We can keep our mics muted. And together we're going to say the affirmation for it, which Omeron is the word. You'll see it in my necklace that I have. I have the symbols from it. But as we begin to get ready for the meditation, we say, I honor the divine love that exists within you, within me, and with all creation. We are all one. And just breathe that in, feel that energy, what that means as we go into opening for the next part of our journey this year in the awakening. I am love. I am awakened. This is who we are and what we are. Awakening, walking into this energy of love. Understanding that we have always been this, no matter what we have believed about ourselves. I am grateful. So I just invite you to sit in this love Bask in it for a few moments in the silence and see what comes up for you in the silence. I am awakening. How does that resonate with you? How does that energy feel? I am awakened. As we sit with that, we allow it, we feel the energy of our heart center expanding, our knowledge growing, and we allow ourselves surrender. We allow ourselves to surrender to these greater truths. And this is good. And we know, as these beings of light that we are, we can create a world that works for all. And as we do that this morning, we open ourselves up to prayer for others, for the planet, seeing this love rise, encompassing the areas, especially the areas there's fighting, there's war, division, areas that are hurting, like Buffalo. People have experienced loss. And where we see a rise of that which has been called COVID, again, we just see the healing. We know we're seeing it right. We see every cell in each person unified and working in perfect and divine order. We see our natural inheritance as prosperity for all people in all areas of their lives. We see lives filled with peace and joy, and we understand that not only do we come from this field called love, but we are love. We are each the embodiment of this love that is our Creator. And for this, we celebrate and we thank all those who came before us to teach us these lessons, to Jesus, our way shower, for coming in and agreeing to do the things that he did, for those who carried on the truths, at times hid the truth, so that we would be able to have it today. For the Fillmores who are way beyond their time, way before their time, here to teach us many of these same principles. For this, we are so grateful to all the guides and the masters, the teachers. We say thank you. And so it is.